When I started as a sterile processing technician, I started in a casual role, the facility called it. It was actually at a surgery center here in the Twin Cities. And I worked every Thursday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you may think to yourself, well, that's a weird position to fill. But I actually had a full-time role working at a vendor. It was a consumable product manufacturer. I sold cleaning brushes, tip protectors, mesh baskets, tray, corner protectors, you name it. All the fun little gadgety stuff. In that role, I was an educator. And I told my boss at the time, and this is a testament to her good leadership, I told her, there is no way that I can justify educating sterile processing professionals without having walked in their shoes. And so I pitched her the idea of approaching a surgery center here in St. Paul, Minneapolis, who we had a great relationship with, and working every single Thursday until I got my 400 hours to get my CRCST certification. She said, girl, you're nuts. And I said, well, not the first time I've been called that. But she said, okay. And so every Thursday, from sun up until sundown, I worked in sterile processing. And I learned about 600,000 things that I didn't know about medical device reprocessing before I started that role. And of that 660,000 things, roughly, of all the things that I learned in that role, one of the most profound things that I learned was the concept of the preciousness of time. Time ruled everything. It ruled when I clocked in and when I clocked out. It ruled how much time I got to spend on breaks with my friends Deb and Lori Molis and Clarence and all the people that I got to know and got to love in that department. Time ruled the success of me being able to properly reprocess instruments to get them ready for the next case. But I learned that time also ruled something else. Time ruled the anxious footsteps pacing the waiting room carpet. Time ruled the amount of anesthesia that a patient had to get to be sedated enough for the surgeons down the hall to use the tools that I prepared that day. And time ultimately ruled the success or the failure of someone being able to rejoin their normal daily life. Time ruled everything. And so today, what I want us all to consider is this fundamental question. What does safe surgery have to do with time? And vice versa, what does time have to do with safe surgery? We're all in this together. Are you ready? Yeah? Okay. Hi, I'm Linz. Lori did a really, really amazing introduction. And Lori, for the record, my kids really miss you. So please come back and visit every once in a while. My kids keep asking, where does Lori go? Why isn't she in the driveway? They would greet her at the window and wave down to her every time she'd get home from work. I'm Linz. I grew up in Wisconsin. I know there's some Wisconsinites here. Any Wisconsinites in the crowd? Oh, my people, I love it. I grew up in a farm in Wisconsin specifically. We had beef cattle, we had goats, we had dogs and cats, we planted crops, and I learned something really early on about the way farmers approach this concept of time. Farmers judge time and use time based on the sunrise and the sunset, based on how long the days are. They use the sunrise and the sunset to determine when it's ready to plant crops. And if they do plant crops, they use the sunrise and the sunset to determine if weeds are going to be really bad that year. My dad was a stickler for making sure that as children, me and my 3 siblings understood that when the sun was up, we were outside washing cattle and getting them ready for the fair. We were planting crops. We were on family vacations in the cornfield picking rock. Yep. And when the sun set, That was the time where we fed and nourished ourselves, where we got to be with each other, to commune with each other as a family. Now, I want to introduce you to a couple of people. These people are very important to me. I'll start with the one in the middle, black body, white face. His name is Jack. He was our childhood pet, our house calf. We didn't have dogs or cats that came in the house, but we did have baby calves that came into our house, okay? Jack's mom died in childbirth, or in calf birth, I guess you could call it. And so he was an orphan that we took in. Next to Jack's head is my sister Paige, okay? Paige is the youngest of all of us. She is the least farmer of all of us. Now, I don't look very farm girl. You can imagine what my sister is if I'm more farmer than her, okay? And then my two hillbilly brothers are still farmers up in northern Minnesota. So that's Derek and Joshua. When we were little, we used to help get the cattle in the barn. And my dad would say to all of us, okay, I want you all to form a semicircle around this herd of cattle, and we're all going to herd them toward the entrance of the barn. But he would look at my little sister Paige, that sweet little innocent girl in the pink, and he would say, okay, Paige, I want you to go stand in the entryway of the barn and be the bait. Now, having kids of my own, I can understand how crazy that parenting decision was. But my sister, being the dutiful daughter, she went to the entrance of the barn and she said, okay, Dad. And my dad would say, I'm going to tell you the exact right time for you to move so you don't get run over. And this is just a normal thing, okay? My dad thought he knew the best timing for everything because he has had to. To be a successful farmer, he has to know the right timing for everything. So here we are, my two brothers, my mom, my dad, myself, all herding these cattle toward my little sister. And she's standing there like a doe with wide eyes, like, okay, when am I gonna move, when am I gonna move? And my dad would say, okay, Paige, run! And she's lived to tell this tale. But here's the thing, every year, when it's Thanksgiving or some other holiday that we're all together as a family, this story and this situation inevitably comes up. Do you remember that time when? Do you remember that time when? It's never, do you remember when that time when my dad made a really dangerous parenting decision? No, it was, do you remember that time when Paige was the bait? Right? And it got me thinking, my dad thought he knew the best time for everything. And I believed it too, because who was I to question that? But as I got older, I started thinking about that concept, that theme of knowing the right time for everything. How many of you have ever been presented with an opportunity or an idea came to you from the universe, from God, from wherever your source of information is? And you said to yourself, it's not the right time right now. I don't have time for that. Maybe if I accomplish this one more thing, then I'll be able to say yes to that opportunity. But sometimes, when we think we know the best timing for everything, maybe we're limiting our opportunities. Maybe if my dad had thought a little bit differently, and maybe if that entryway had been open, and my sister hadn't been blocking it, maybe it would have been easier to get those cattle in. Maybe it would have put her in a safer position. Maybe that thing that you said no to yesterday, even if you thought it was the wrong time, what if that doesn't come back around again? I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase before, but the universe will only extend its benevolence for so long before extending the opportunity to someone else. I take that with me. So next time an opportunity comes your way, consider it a gift, and consider it an opportunity to look and see if you're using time as an excuse to say no, especially if it's an opportunity that will bring you joy. Growing up on a farm, I listened to a lot of Reba McEntire, Leanne Rimes, Shania Twain. I actually sang a Shania Twain song for a talent contest once. I crushed it. But I wanted to be a country music singer from like age 4. Like, that was it for me. I sang to everyone and anything that would pay me any attention. The UPS man would come down the driveway, he would deliver the package, and I'd be like, hey, you want to hear a song? My parents have hours and hours of VHS tapes of me sitting in the trees singing to the birds and the squirrels, or me sitting in the barn singing to the cattle. That was it for me. I knew I was going to be a famous country music singer. I had the cowgirl boots, I had the cowgirl hat, I sang the national anthem at football games, I sang at church, I sang at school, I sang at funerals, I sang at nursing homes, you name it. I knew that was what I was going to do when I grew up. When it came time to apply to college, I ended up with a music scholarship to Hamline University in St. Paul. Woo, yeah. And that got me an automatic audition to their honors choir. And of course, since I nailed that Shania Twain talent show, I knew I was going to nail this audition to be part of their prestigious choir. So I went and I sang my heart out, okay? And I waited for 2 weeks to get to the phone call that said, hey, congratulations, you've been accepted. Well, that phone call finally came, and the woman on the other end of the line said, congratulations, you've made it into the general choir. And I was like, oh, is that another name for the honors choir? And she said, no, ma'am, you've made it into the general choir. And I said, okay, do you have to try out to be part of this general choir? And she said, no, ma'am. Anyone who's interested in music can be part of this general choir. And in that moment, mind you, I was already on the path to stardom, okay? Me and my cowgirl boots were well on our way to being famous. And in that moment, my 18-year-old brain thought that all of that time that I had put into singing at coffee shops with my band Imagine, and singing at football games, and entertaining people, and making people feel something. My 18-year-old brain told me that all that time was wasted, because clearly this was cutting off that dream. Now, I don't know if you know any 18-year-olds. It can be a little rash sometimes. Your brain's not even fully developed when you're 18. So with time comes perspective. And what I learned in the following years after getting rejected in that instance was that everything in your past that feels like wasted time is preparing you for something bigger. All the time that I had spent engaging with other people, entertaining people, making them smile, making them laugh, making them feel something, all of that time wasn't wasted. It was preparing me for this. Now, I've done a lot of educating in the sterile processing world back since 2011, 2012, when I did a lot of in-services at hospitals, mostly around the state of California. And I thought my entrance into the sterile processing world could not have come at a worse time. I was a brand new college graduate in the public relations industry. I actually went to, so this is a side note, I actually went to school to be an occupational therapist, but I was in an anatomy and biology class and I saw a cadaver and passed out, so I switched to communications the next day. So, you know, those 18-year-old brash decisions. But so I did a lot of educating, and I got a phone call from a guy I used to nanny for throughout college, and he said, hey, I know you're working for a coffee company, you're doing PR, but I think you'd be a good salesperson for my medical device company. And I thought, I've never done sales before. Like in my head, I was going through all the reasons why it wasn't the right time to accept this role. But something in that 18-year-old brain, 19-year-old brain, made me say yes. And so what I did in that role, selling instrument cleaning brushes primarily, was go on a mission to become the brush lady in the state of California. I wanted every single hospital in California to know me as the cleaning brush lady, okay? So I created this presentation all about friction and fluidics and brush diameter and bristle length and bristle type and you name it. And I added important quotes and swelling emotive opportunities in that presentation. And I talked about how, maybe someday your loved one will be on that table. Maybe someday you will be on that operating room table. And wouldn't you want the best for yourself and your loved ones? I was on a mission. And there was one particular in-service that I gave at a very large hospital in Central California. There were about 70 technicians that I gave this cleaning brush presentation to, okay? I was about 6 months pregnant at the time. And if you've ever worn scrub pants, you understand that they're not made for anyone that's not shaped like a rectangle, right? Okay, so me being very close to the ground and also very pregnant, scrub pants weren't my favorite thing. But I was like, there are 70 people in this room. I am about to establish myself as the brush lady. This has got to go well. So I was giving my presentation talking about how alone you can do so little, but together you can do so much. And I raised my cleaning brush up in the air at the end to make my final stand. At the same moment, my scrub pants dropped to the ground.
No way.
Now,
That's good.
okay, so there were a lot of things going through my brain in that moment. Most of them being the eyeballs that dropped from my cleaning brush up in the air to my missing drawers. And I realized in that moment that I was on a mission to be the brush lady. What do you think everyone referred to me as from that henceforth? The girl whose drawers dropped to the ground during her presentation. Yes, yes. And I realized that I'm going to be memorable for different reasons than I predict. I did not go into that situation thinking that my pants were going to fall off, and for years, that was what I'd be known for those 70 people. This is another side note. I was at HSPA in Las Vegas this year, and wouldn't you know it, someone came up to me and was like, "Hey, I think I remember you." And I was like, "Oh, cool, where have we met?" And they were like, "You're the girl whose pants fell off in the presentation." Yeah. Yes, that was me. My encouragement to you, those opportunities that are scary, those opportunities that you may not think are the right time, you're going to be memorable for different reasons than you predict. You have no way to control what someone's going to remember you for, but you have every bit of control over if they're going to remember you at all. So a couple months later, I had my daughter, and I had a doula. I don't know if you know what a doula is, but it was a birth support person. And when I was in my postpartum period, the couple months afterwards, I looked at my doula and I said, I would like to do what you do. And she was like, maybe now's not the time to make one of those really big life-changing decisions. But I did it anyway. So I signed up for a doula certification program. And I thought, this is going to be great. One of my favorite doula gifts that I've ever received. Now, mind you, this is outside the scope of what a doula is supposed to do, okay? But let me tell you a little background about this mug. Last year, on Easter morning, I got a phone call from one of my clients. And she said, I'm very much in labor. We're almost ready to go to the birth center. I think you should join us now. And I said, okay, I'll be right over. So I went over to their house. They live here in St. Paul. And I let myself in the front door and walked up the stairs to their bathroom. And I got up there, and it was the middle of the night. It was like 3 a.m. Her older daughter was sleeping. And I walked into the bathroom. I said, hey, how you doing? And she looked up at me and she said, I think I waited too long. And I was like, oh, okay. Let's get you downstairs to the car. And I looked at her husband and I was like, we gotta go. Just kind of, keeping it together in front of her, but making sure he knows this sense of urgency. And so we helped her down the stairs to the front door. And we got out to the car, because he had pulled it up to the front entrance. And we got to the car and she said, no, baby's coming, baby's coming. And I said, okay, let's go back inside. So we get her back inside and I said, okay, let's go into the living room. She said, no, I just got new carpet. And I was like, how are you this concerned and with it enough to be concerned about your carpet? But okay, right here in the foyer, I asked her parents who were there to provide childcare for the older kid. I asked her parents to go get some towels and some blankets. And right there in the foyer, I delivered her baby. She delivered her baby. I assisted, okay? Babies aren't pizzas, everybody. It just so happened that I tied the umbilical cord with a shoelace. She works for a shoe company. As a former PR person, solid move on my part, okay? Solid move. Everything turned out very well. Everyone was safe. We ended up getting an ambulance to the hospital. And as we were getting her settled in her postpartum room, one of the nurses looked at me, excuse me, one of the nurses looked at me and said, how long have you been a doula? And I was like, I usually answer this question by saying 5 years. But today, I'm going to answer this question by saying long enough to know what to do during an accidental home birth. Because the best way to measure time is by what happens between the endpoints. Jamid was just talking about outcome measures versus process measures. And these are like your outcome measures versus your process measures of life, right? A lot of times when we get asked how long we've invested time, shared our time with a certain activity, a certain role, a certain person, we count the starts and the stops. And we completely bypass all of the nuance of everything beautiful and chaotic and meaningful in between. When's the last time someone asked you how long you've been in your role? Recently, right? And what was your answer?
Yesterday.
Okay, what was your answer?
The time.
The actual time.
Like to the month.
Right, exactly. So I want to encourage you, consider doing the math, even if it's a rough estimate. How many cases do you support in a day? Figure out how many cases you support in a week, then in a month, then in a year. And the next time someone asks you how long you've been in your role, you can tell them exactly how many lives you've supported, how many safe surgeries you've supported, how many people you've allowed and supported to get back to their daily life. Because that time in the middle is so rich and so beautiful. And just by focusing on the starts and the stops, we forget all that. So here I was, full-time job as a clinical educator, part-time sterile processing technician, and a doula. I decided, maybe I should infuse my life with more stress relief activities. Okay? How many of you ever have taken an ice bath before? A couple people? Cool. This is literally me the first time I ever submerged in a vat of ice. My immediate thought when I sat down was, this is how I die. It's a good thing I'm in a cooler right now because they can just close this sucker up and save me for later. Thaw me out when the time comes. Okay? I learned all the things that there was to learn about the benefits of an ice bath. The vagal nerve stimulation, the stress reduction, the muscle tension reduction, the mental and emotional health benefits. I learned it all and I was like, yes, that's for me. Most of my life, people have been calling me nuts for various reasons. So of course, ice bath, yes, sign me up. As I was about to lower myself down, I think the person in the cooler next to me saw the fear on my face, because intense situations tend to elicit very intense emotions. She saw the fear on my face, and she told me this. She said, "You're forgetting every available resource. Use your breath. If you can control your breath, you can control your emotions, and you can get through this. And so I did. I breathed on the count of 6, in and out, in and out. And 3 minutes later, I pried myself out of that vat of ice, and I was so proud that I did that. But here's what that angel of a woman taught me. She taught me that feelings are not facts. Just because I was feeling fear in that moment, it didn't mean I was going to freeze to death. These intense feelings are just data. And that data, similar to how data can inform our decision-making in sterile processing, that data that those emotions were giving me were telling me that I needed to employ additional resources. That I needed to take a look at the situation and say, what can I bring in to this situation to help me cope? 2 years ago, I felt fear unlike anything I've ever felt in my life. My eye had been feeling really heavy. My right eye had been feeling really heavy. I was having blurred vision. And I thought, oh crap, I haven't been to the eye doctor in a couple years, I better go. I probably need a new prescription. I get to my eye doctor, and he does the normal tests, and he said, wow, this is really strange. Your vision is completely different in your right eye, like to an extreme. And I thought, well, yeah, that's why I'm here, right? Help me. And he thought I had a retinal tear based on what he saw. And he said, you know what, I really think you need to see an ophthalmologist. I was like, great, give me a referral, I'll try to make an appointment next week. And he goes, no, today. I thought, oh, all right, got nothing else to do. Thankfully, it wasn't a Thursday. So I went to the ophthalmologist. And how many of you have ever been in one of those situations where you walk into the room and the air just feels tense? Mm-hmm. Like you walk into the room and your nervous system just goes on alert. I walk into the ophthalmologist's office, and that was the feeling in the room. It was just tense and just weird. And I was like, wow, this place must suck to work in.
She did.
But I sat down in the exam chair, and he took out an ultrasound machine and did an ultrasound over my eyelid. And he was dictating different measurements to his assistant in the room. And it was very, just like, awkward and quiet, and just didn't feel good, right? And at one point, he shut off the monitor and turned his swivel chair to me, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, you don't have a retinal tear. I was like, sweet, hallelujah. He's like, you have a tumor in your right eye. He said, the amount of radiation that it would take to kill this tumor would take your life. So the best case scenario is enucleation. We're going to remove your whole eye within the next 2 weeks. And I was like, back up a second. I just thought I needed new glasses earlier today. And he said, would you like me to call your husband? And I can retell all of this. And sure enough, my husband and my then 2-year-old came to the ophthalmologist's office, and he said, your wife has ocular melanoma. It's a rare form of eye cancer. 4 out of 1 million people get diagnosed, usually 70-year-old men with blue eyes. We need to remove your wife's eye. And my husband and I sat in the room for a little bit, called my mom to come get my son so we could process. And where's the first place? When you get any sort of diagnosis, where's the first place that you usually go for more information?
Google.
Google, right? Dr. Google. Horrible decision. Horrible decision. My daughter was 4 at the time, and I'm one of those parents who will lay next to my kids until they fall asleep, until I get kicked out of their bed, or until the day I die. That's just what works for us. And so later that night, I was laying in bed with my daughter, Vivian, and as she was falling asleep in the crook of my arm, her breathing slowing, getting more and more heavy and drawn, I was over here, on my phone, Googling. And I was learning about ocular melanoma. I was learning that it happens in 4 to 1 million people. I was learning that if it spreads, it's hard to treat. I was learning that if it spreads to your liver, typically it peppers your liver with a whole bunch of different tumors, and it's even harder to treat at that point. I was learning about all the rates of death and like life expectancies and all of this stuff. And as I was learning all of this stuff, I was letting Google paint my reality. All the fear that Google was drumming up, that fear was turning into reality. It was turning into fact. And when my daughter fell asleep, I walked out and I crumbled in the hallway. Because I didn't know if I was going to see her start kindergarten. I didn't know if I was going to see my soon high schooler start high school. I didn't know if I was going to get to do this next presentation with people that I've invested so much time supporting. And my husband came and put his arm around me. And he said, remember what fear means? He said, fear is an acronym. You taught me this. Fear stands for forgetting every available resource. He said, tomorrow we will find the best team to care for you. We will find the best surgeon to remove your eye. You don't need that one anyway. You got 2. We will find the best care team to support you with. Because that's what this fear is doing, is it's reminding us that we're not drawing on the resources that are available. 2 weeks later, I was laying on a table getting anesthesia, and I was getting wheeled back through the hospital hallway. And it never occurred to me that the last thing that a lot of patients see are the ceiling tiles in your hospital. Those suckers are gross. Like, come on. Let's talk about patient experience. Like, maybe include the ceiling tiles. And what's interesting is in that moment, as I was getting wheeled back to surgery, I wasn't thinking about my kids in that moment. I wasn't thinking about my husband, who was anxiously pacing the waiting room floor carpet. Do you know what I was thinking about? You. I was thinking about the people who were about to make my surgery a success. I was wondering if they paid as much attention to those dinky little eye instruments as they do the more complicated ones, or were they an afterthought? I was thinking about you sharing your time with something that was about to make me live or die. That's what you do every day. And so as I was staring at those disgusting ceiling tiles, which honestly, they still it's like a screensaver in my brain, right? I was thanking my lucky stars that I know you, that I know what you do, that I know the role that you play in not only my surgery, but the surgery of everyone else who needs one. Having one eye has really shifted perspective for me. And perception too, like depth perception, woo. I feel really tall though now. So something I did not expect was that I'm 5'2" on a good day, right? But having one eye makes me feel like I'm like 5'6", 5'7". It's pretty sweet. The trouble with that is going up and down stairs is really hard. I run into crap all day long. My 14-year-old daughter drew me a tattoo, because she draws most of my tattoos. And the most recent one that she drew is a coffee carafe pouring coffee next to a coffee mug. That little shit, she's good. She's good. Am I gonna get it? Yes, I am, because that's funny as hell. But having one eye changes things. It changes a lot of things. You know those memes? It's like, tell me you're a one-eyed person without telling me you're a one-eyed person? My picture would be my passenger side mirror on my car. Shattered. My husband has replaced that sucker multiple times, and it's just a lost cause at this point. Just a lost cause. But here's something that's interesting. Even those tedious little things that sort of interrupt your day-to-day, my day-to-day, those shifts in perspective, I realized that this diagnosis was kind of like a claw machine in an arcade. Have you ever played one of those claw machines? Oh, my kids love them. But it was like a claw machine that sort of forced perspective. It lifted me up out of my daily reality, and it forced that perspective. And it forced me to take a look at what I was doing, how I was getting stressed out, how I was sharing my time, how I was spending my time. It also made me realize that we villainize time in how we speak about it. We waste time, we spend time, we kill time, we blame time for not spending time with the people that we care about or seeing the places that we want to see. It's always time's fault. But time offers an interesting perspective as well. Just like when I failed that audition, and after a little bit of time I gained perspective, thinking that, okay, it wasn't a waste, but it was actually preparing me. I realized that there were a couple things that I wasn't prepared for. And this perspective looks like this. Number one, I didn't know I was going to get eye cancer and get my eye removed. Does it make for a really cool party trick? Yeah, I can pop this sucker out whenever I want. I didn't realize that the cancer would spread to my liver within 18 months. I didn't realize that when it spread to my liver, it would pepper my liver, giving me 30 little buddies to treat. But you know what else I didn't realize? I didn't realize that I would see more clearly with one eye than I ever did with two. And that's the power of perspective. I wouldn't trade this for the world, because now I share, see, it's even hard to shift language. I share time with the people and the things that matter in the end. All those little stressors that used to stress me out just don't. I spend more time, I share more time with my children. Instead of saying, oh, Mama has another phone call, Mama can't do that. Can't or won't. Because here's something else that I learned, is how we spend our day is how we spend our week, is how we spend our month, is how we spend our year, is how we spend our life. So what would happen if that claw machine picked you up out of your reality? What would you see? What would that forced perspective give you in terms of a perspective shift? That shit's powerful. It's real powerful. When I was a sterile processing tech, learning about the preciousness of time, I didn't understand the second part, the renewable part, until after my diagnosis, the renewability of time. The fact that we think that we don't have enough time for things, but we wake up with the gift of more time every single morning. Time is so precious, but it also renews each day. And it's on your side if you choose to believe it. So my question to you is, what does safe surgery have to do with time? Everything. Because by participating in any way in the effort towards safe surgery, by doing what you do on a daily basis, allowing for people to get operated on safely, you are gifting them more time. And there's nothing more precious than that. Thank you. From a surgical patient, from a sterile processing advocate, from a human being. Thank you for what you do on a daily basis. It deserves to be celebrated, and I celebrate you every day. Thanks, everybody.